Hello guys and welcome back to the Minecraft mod tutorial. In today's episode we're going to be going through entities in 1.14 and this should also work in 1.13 as well. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our init and we're going to create a tutorial entities. And inside of here we're going to be registering our entities. So entities are actually based on entity types now. So you want a public static entity type, and the type inside of here, txn's entities, put question mark, as we don't know the actual entity when we're registering it like this. And then we're going to get the name of our entity, so tutorial entity, and just leave it declared like that for now. We're going to come back and put some more stuff in there later, but we'll leave that for now. There are two other things we need to register when we register our entities, and those two things are the spawn egg for spawning the entity, and also registering spawning the entities in the world as well. So what we're going to do is firstly create a function public register entity spawn egg, and we're going to be creating a spawn egg item. So put spawn egg item, and that's equal to a new spawn egg item. And once taken our entity type, we're going to add some parameters here because this is a function that we're going to reuse multiple times. So entity type of question mark, call it type, and put type in here. Primary and secondary colour are the two colours on your spawn egg. So the primary colour is the main one and the secondary one is the one that's like dotted around. So these are integers. So int colour 1 and int colour 2. And they're going to go in these parameters. And then finally, since it's an item, it's going to be a new item.properties, and then you can add whatever properties you want. For group, I'm going to have mine in my normal item group. But there we are, we have created the spawn egg item. We then need to set its registry name, item.setRegistryName, tutorial mod registries dot the location function, and then we're going to create a string name parameter in here, and that will be what it's registered as. And we actually want to return an item here, public return item, so just put return item, and that will return our spawn egg. So public static void register entity spawn eggs. And this is going to be just like an item registry. So final registry event dot register item and call it event. And inside of here, just like in the item registry, event dot get registry dot register all. And then inside of our tutorial items, we're going to add another set of items, public static item tutorial entity egg, and inside of here we're going to put tutorial items dot tutorial entity egg is equal to register spawn egg tutorial entity, the two colours. You can go onto your web browser and search for hexadecimal colour picker. It'll bring up this nice Google thing here. You can choose whatever colour you want, and as you can see you get this 2F5882 thing, so copy that. Say if we want this blue colour, and then for colour 1 you put 0x and then paste that number in, and that is the primary colour. And the secondary colour, let's put this pinkish colour. We get this number here, 0x and then paste it. And those are the two colours of our spawn egg. And then the name is just going to be tutorial entity egg. And that is all our spawn eggs registered. We now need to go into tutorial mob registries. And beneath this first event for registering items, we can put tutorial entities dot register entity spawn eggs and put the event parameter in there, and then it'll register our spawn eggs. Now back in here, we also want to do the world spawning as well. So we're going to create another thing, public static void register entity world spawns, and we want to be able to register our entity in multiple biomes. So we do a for loop, biome, where it goes through all of the biomes that we input as a parameter. So put biome dot biome 3 dots biomes, and that's the biomes parameter for, you can put as many biomes as you want. If biome is not equal to null, biome dot get spawns, and we want to take an entity classification, so add a parameter up here, entity classification, type, no, just classification. So that's what it takes in, that parameter there, dot add a new spawn list entry, and then that takes in our entity. So we are going to put entity type entity, and then it takes in the weight. So I don't know, I'm going to put 10. You need to play around with these numbers to figure out how often you want your entity to spawn. The minimum group count, so the minimum amount of them that can spawn in the same place, 1, obviously. We want at least 1 to spawn all the time. And the maximum that can spawn together, say 10. And so that will do, it will go through, and each of the biomes that you select, it will add your entity to the spawn list. So now above that, public static void register entity world spawns, and just call register entity world spawn tutorial entity classification dot creature, but obviously there's other ones as well. There's monster, water creature, ambient. I'm going to put creature. And then the biomes, you can put as many as you want here. So biomes dot, well, we can say plains. Let's put a comma after that. Biomes dot beach. Biomes dot jungle, whatever. You can keep putting as many as you want here, and all of those will add your entity to spawn in there. You can also put a custom biome if you have made one of them, or we'll get around to it in the future tutorials. Now we need to actually create our entity class. So we are going to go into our create a new package here called .entities, and create a new class and just call it tutorial entity, and it extends. And there's lots of types of entities, and depending on what you want to do and what things and functions you want to have, you can extend different things. I'm going to extend creature entity. I want to make this a public tutorial entity here. It takes in a type, and that type is going to be .tutorial entity, and it's going to ask you to cast the argument. So just click cast and then override the warning. There's two main things that characterize your entity's behavior. There are goals, register goals, this function, and attributes. So you go into the goals here and put this dot goal selector dot add goal. The priority of the goal, where the lowest priority is, or the lowest number is the highest priority. So, and put new, and there's lots of different types of goals. As you can see here, here's just a few of them. You can find them all inside of your reference libraries, projects and external dependencies, sorry. Inside of Forge, Net, Minecraft, Entity, AI, and then inside of Goal, here are all the goals that you can use. A lot of them are generic, but some of them are also for specific entities, but you may want to use them as well. So all entities always have swim goal as their first thing, because it makes sure that if they accidentally fall into water, they don't decide to just drown and try and do something else, and it'll just break the game quite honestly. And new swim goal this. Then there's some other goals you can add. There's the random walking goal, which takes in this and the walking speed it goes. So you can put 1.2 double, I don't know. You can test out these values again. There's the look randomly goal. And there are also some, if you're creating a monster entity, you can do the nearest attackable target goal, or the melee attack goal, or the leap at target goal. Then inside of register attributes, you can, these are to do with health and speed. This dot get attribute, shared monster attributes dot, and there's lots of things here. So you can do max health is the thing, and you can do set base value. With this, will set the health of your entity. So I'm going to put 20.0 double. That's about the health of a zombie, I believe. Attack damage if you're making an attacking mob. Attack speed, but movement speed is probably the other one that everyone needs. I'm going to also put this at 1.2 double. But this may be really high, I'm not too sure. You need to test out the values to see how they work for you. There are plenty of other functions that you can use, and you can look through all the different types of entity to see if there's any functions that you might use. Like riding entities, you can look through the horse and see if see how that works, so you can add it to your entities. This is a very basic entity here, and I have created that. Now back in tutorial entities, we can actually register our entity. Well, we can initialize our entity. So this is equal to entity type dot builder dot create. It takes in an ifactory and a classification. The factory is your entity, tutorial entity, ::new. So that it creates a factory of your tutorial entity and creates a new version of it. And classification, entity classification dot creature. It actually in register entity world spawn, you don't even need to have this parameter here. You can just use entity.get classification. So that saves you a little bit of code there. So you can remove that. Make things a little simpler. So now we've created it, we need to actually build it. So build. This takes an ID for your entity. So call it tutorial entity. But you also need your mod ID on there. So tutorial mod registries dot mod ID plus colon tutorial entity. And then we also need to set the registry name to use the location function and also set it to tutorial entity. I know it's a very long function, but that actually initializes your entity. And the reason we're not doing that inside of the tutorial mod registries is because the item registry event registers before the entity registry event. So we have to initialize that inside of the entity class, or when your spawning is created, it won't actually work because the entity was created after. So now we can actually register it because we've initialized it first. So once again, give a copy of the register blocks function here, change it to an entity type registry, and call it register entities. Then in here we can call event.getRegistry.register, and we can just call tutorial entities .tutorial entity. That's all we have to do, as we've already declared it inside of there. And just the final thing here, inside of the register entities function, you're going to want to call tutorial entities .register entity world spawns. So once your entity is registered, you can also spawn it in the correct biomes. So then it should spawn in the biomes you've set it to, and you'll need to mess around with the weight and spawn group values to get it to be the correct amount. So now if you were to create the game, the entity would actually register, but right now it wouldn't render or anything. It would look, well, it wouldn't even load the entity at all. It would be invisible as it doesn't have a render. So this is something that we do on the client side. So let's create a new package called client, and then there's going to be two packages, one called .render, the other called .models. Inside of .renders, we're going to create a new class, call it tutorial entity render, and it's going to extend living renderer that takes in the entity and the entity model. So tutorial entity and tutorial entity model. Then in models, create the class tutorial entity model, and it's going to extend entity model, and that takes in the entity tutorial entity. And then we're going to need to add the constructor and unimplemented methods as well. We can get rid of these two parameters here, and we can just call this one manager. If you're using the latest mappings, then you should have, this should all be named correctly. For some reason mine is not, but I will update our mappings soon. Obviously I showed you in the last tutorial how to do that really easily. It takes in the model itself, new tutorial entity model, taking the shadow size so you can mess around with that value and see how it looks. Get entity texture, mod registries dot location, and then we're going to take in textures, entity, and then tutorial entity dot png, and we have to return tutorial mod registries dot location like that. We create what's called a render factory. So we are going to create a static class called render factory, and that's going to implement iRender factory for our tutorial entity. We're going to add the unimplemented method, which is get render for, or create render for, sorry. and then return a new tutorial entity render manager. So it actually returns this, and then we call this factory function inside our inside of a new class called tutorial render registry. Create a new class called public static void register entity renderers. Then call rendering registry dot register entity rendering handler. The entity class is tutorial entity dot class, and the render factory is tutorial entity render dot render factory. Sorry, it's a new tutorial entity render dot render factory. Then inside of each of these classes that we've put in client, you need to put at only in distribution dist dot client. So this code will only ever run in the client side. Same in the render here, and same in the model as well. If you want to know how to create your own custom entity model, you can watch the previous entity tutorial where I go through that. It's exactly the same process. You just use that model file that you create from the program and put it in here. Just make sure to add this only in at the top. And you might need to change a few names around for the newest version of Minecraft. But apart from that, it should all be the same. But instead of creating a completely new model right now, because I'm quite busy, I'm just going to extend entity cow model so that I can show you everything's working here. So next, inside of the client registries function, we are going to call tutorial render registry dot register entity renders. Next, we need to actually create our texture for our thing. So we go into paint.net, and you can open up the default Minecraft files if you have them downloaded, which I will leave the link for in the description. I have the 1.12 version, but you can find the 1.14 version online as well somewhere. It just shouldn't matter though, as most things are still the same. Well, quite a lot of textures did change, but not for entities. So I'm going to get the cow texture here. I'm going to just change some colours around to show you that it is working. So there we are, we have this cow texture now. I'm going to file save as. Save it inside of your mod folder. Textures, then entity. And then call it tutorial entity.png. And this works the same as if you are using a custom model. That program will automatically generate the textures for your thing. So you just put that texture file into that location. So now everything should be declared. Once I'm forgetting something, we will test now. So we run the game, run client, we go into our tutorial item group here. I've forgotten to actually add the textures for the entity egg, but it's very similar to the normal item creation, so it's fine. And if you go and place this down, I actually forgot to refresh my dependencies there. Just press F5 on it and it should refresh. And then if you, I think it's F3 and T, it will reload the resource packs. And there we are, we have the custom entity that's randomly walking around. I think its speed is a bit too fast. You also need to go into your lang file. Firstly, item.tutorialmod.tutorial entity egg is a tutorial entity egg, and then entity.tutorialmod.tutorial_entity, and that's just tutorial entity. So your lang file is now done. You just need to create a model item. So create a new model here, call it tutorial entity egg, and just put, all you have to do is put parent item template spawn egg. And that should work. And there we are, we now have the tutorial entity egg here. It spawns our tutorial entity. Its speed is a bit too fast, but as you can see, we've got our custom textures on our spawn egg. One more thing is about them spawning in the world. I do believe it should also be spawning in the world, as I have tested this previously. But if you do have any issues, feel free to join my Discord, linked in the description, where some of my mods or other people can help you with your issues. So thank you for watching this tutorial. If you have enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and subscribe for more. This took me quite a while to figure out. I had quite a lot of issues to spawn eggs, so likes and comments are much appreciated. Thank you for watching. My name's been Harry, and goodbye.